Thank you, Brian. That was an incredibly kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be with you tonight. I'm going to take this off if that's okay. It's always, as you know now a little bit about me, it's always dangerous when I stray from my talking points, and Mike Mauer's back there quivering right now. As I learned yesterday, are there any reporters from the Salt Lake Tribune in the room before I start my speech today? All right, I feel a little safer. I'm so excited to be here today, and just honored to be with such a distinguished group of very, very bright people, some of the best of Utah. And thank you for allowing me the opportunity to kick off this incredible event. And just to welcome you here. The theme this year, Utah Technology Through Time, is something that is very personal to me, and I hope you'll forgive me as I share just a little bit of my background. When it comes to technology in Utah, my family has been somewhat at the forefront in a very rural part of the state. In 1903, in the small town of Fairview in Sanpete County, there were 4 farmers, and they had heard about this invention, better known as the telephone, and they desperately wanted to be able to make phone calls, and they couldn't do it. They begged the big telephone company, the predecessor to Ma Bell at the time, to please bring telephone service to Fairview. And they said no, there just aren't enough people there to make it work. And they were right, there were not enough people there to make it work. Nonetheless, these 4 enterprising individuals got their horses and decided that they were going to find a way to bring telephone service from Mount Pleasant, about 7 miles away to the south, bring it north to Fairview. And that's exactly what they did. An old open wire line, they put it there, they got it into town, and for the first several years there were 4 telephones, and that was all that could be afforded. And so over time they started to grow, and a few more people joined up, and then my great-grandfather in 1909 purchased this budding young Fairview Telephone Company, and it remained in the family from that day forward, but never very successful. Fairview grew and more telephones were added. When I was born, there were about 1,100 people in Fairview, and today there are about 1,200 people in Fairview. So nothing has really changed. There were a few more telephones, and now there are a few less telephones. But as history went on, it was as my great-grandfather, when he passed away, he had several sons, one of which was my grandfather, and they decided that one of the sons would get the telephone company and the other one would get the farm. And my grandfather volunteered for the farm, and that was a really bad choice at the time. And we still farm, and we're still losing money, just as he did all those years. So my great-uncle then, my dad's uncle, got the telephone company. And his son worked there, never having really more than 3 employees in the first 80 years of the history of the phone company. And they were always family members. When my grandfather got sick, my dad had to leave school. My grandfather had cancer and couldn't run the farm, so my dad had to run the farm and knew he could not make a living running the farm and providing for a family. So he started working as another employee at the telephone company. His job application went like this. They went out, there was a telephone pole. His uncle said, if you can climb that pole, I'll give you a job. It took my dad a while, but he made it to the top of the pole, and that's how he got the job. Things went on, time marched on, the company was struggling, almost bankrupt. Some of you will remember the great flood that happened in Thistle when the mountain came down, right? I want to say 1983, it was 83, when the mountain came down. Well, at that time, this small Fairview Telephone Company had expanded greatly. They covered Fairview, Fountain Green, and Thistle. They had not quite doubled in size, but just a huge company. And then suddenly Thistle was gone. And the workers needed telephone service. And the company was broke, and they didn't know how they could do it. So my dad and his cousin put their heads together and said, we can do this. They started working. They started calling everyone they knew. They called in every favor they could possibly do. And in the matter of a week, basically, they installed an old analog switch that normally would take a year to install. They actually hired a helicopter, they hired on credit, fortunately, and the helicopter laid a telephone line above the water line across, just laid in the trees. That was the telephone line. And that's how they were able to get service. Well, something happened to them at that time, and they thought, you know what? We just did something really hard. And in a pioneering spirit, they said, we can do more. And so they went to work, they started growing the company, they started adding employees, and I was very fortunate. In 2003, working at a law firm here in Salt Lake, I asked my wife, is the world a better place because of what I'm doing? And she said, absolutely not. And so we decided at that time to leave the practice of law and move back to rural Utah to work at this now budding telephone company with 40 employees at the time. Now, what's amazing is telephone service, home telephone service, again, for the first 80 plus years, that's all there was, and just a few employees, and everybody had their telephone, and the world was a simple place. And now it's a very complicated place. And we decided that we were going to be an internet company. And so for the last 10 years, I've been delivering big bandwidth circuits along the Wasatch Front of all places. In fact, 4 of the fastest growing companies in the state of Utah now take service from what used to be Fairview Telephone Company, and they're in Lehigh, and they're in Draper, and they're along the Wasatch Front, and we now have 95 employees. That's the history of technology in Utah for me, and it's been amazing. It's been such a benefit to my family. And when you look at what's happening in the state of Utah, the governor likes to call us the Silicon Slopes. Just like Silicon Valley in California. And it's true, something absolutely amazing and special is happening here. I'll end with this, and I'm well off my talking points, and I apologize, but I had 2 experiences in the last 2 months that were just fascinating to me. As the Lieutenant Governor, one of the things that I do is I'm the Secretary of State as well, which means I get to host people from other countries when they come here, dignitaries. And I had a chance to spend an afternoon with the Crown Prince of Luxembourg. Now, as a good historian, I had to look up where Luxembourg was. I kind of remember it. France and Germany, somewhere in between there. And I didn't know that they had a crown prince. And my daughter asked me what Disney movie he was in, and was very disappointed when I explained that he was not in a Disney movie. And then just last week, the Prime Minister of Australia, the former Prime Minister, she finished up in 2013, just a delightful woman, came and spoke here in the state of Utah, and I hosted her as well. And both of them asked me, in one form or another, the exact same question. They had studied Utah, they saw what was happening here, and they couldn't explain it. Both of them had spent a lot of time in the United States. They had spent time in Los Angeles and New York and Washington, D.C. on both coasts. They loved America. They knew what we had to offer. They could see the economic growth that was happening here. And then they saw the numbers in Utah, specifically in the technology industry, and they said the same thing. Why Utah? We don't get it. What is happening here? And I've thought a lot about that. At the end of the day, there are lots of explanations for what's happening here. But it's the people, the pioneering spirit that has always been here and that continues to be here. Whether you've been here for 6 generations like my family, all in Fairview, we don't get out much, or if you've just been here 6 months, that pioneering spirit that comes here, this idea of technology and what it can do to improve all of our lives. Utah is proud to be at the forefront of that, and we're proud to be making history. So as you're here and as you study history, I'm so thankful to the Department of History for what they do here in the state of Utah, for helping us remember how we got here, why we're here, and remembering who we are and what makes this state great. That's what you're here to learn about, and I'm excited at that. Now, I would like to, if I could, for just a moment, pay tribute to and salute the board and the staff of the State History Department. You guys do some amazing things. But more particular, now I know we've already mentioned their names, but I have a letter from the governor for both of them that I would like to give them. In June of 1997, then Governor Michael Levitt appointed Mike Homer to the Utah State Board of History. 4 years later, Mike was appointed the chair of the board. During his tenure, Mike has excelled at community building with politicians, funders, students, academics, and the public. He has shown tremendous leadership in guiding the board. He has demanded intellectual rigor in all research. He's provided incredible moral support to the entire staff. Also, I'd like to recognize another board member, Scott Christensen, who has served for 9 years. His valuable leadership has been greatly appreciated by state history as well. And on behalf of Governor Gary R. Herbert and myself, I would like to thank both Mike and Scott. And if you don't mind coming up, I've got letters for you, and I'd like to hand those to you now. We got the wrong ones. There we go. I knew I messed something up.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, again, on behalf of the governor, the almost 3 million people of the great state of Utah, thank you for what you do. Thank you for being here tonight, and good luck with the conference. Thank you so much.